typically are the ones who notice the bigger issues happening in the fleet. Of course, it has to be them, but we thank them for it. And they have a special path that allows their tickets to receive a higher priority and go to a higher level of AV maintenance technician. But how do these technicians actually know what to do when they get to the room? Now, we'll give them some credit and say they're AV experts. They've learned from experience, they're seasoned professionals, but how do they know the intricate Google ecosystem and all the things that folks on my team have learned over time? Well, I am a huge advocate of documentation. I do have a confession. I am a former technical writer. So for me, working on documentation is still really, really important. So having support articles that are technician-facing as well as user-facing within reason. How much do you want your users to do? Do you want them climbing on the floor and unplugging hardware? Probably not. Will they do it? Some will. We're not so, happy about that, but we also have playbooks for the technicians so that they can go into a room and know exactly how to troubleshoot an issue. Is there a known software bug that's being worked on? Is there a workaround that they can employ? Is this an issue where the device is not in the inventory system and therefore not on the right VLAN? We look to our expert AV maintenance technicians to become the trainers who then train their colleagues at different levels, which I'll talk about. And then if there's some kind of notification we want to let you know about, hey, there's a new feature coming out, or there's something in our experimental rooms, we send out Google communications to these folks, whether targeted to a certain area or to the entire group of AV maintenance technicians. So we try to keep them in the loop. We try to look for gaps in our documentation, and we try to make it the best that it can be so that they can do their jobs, or at least drive some level of user self-sufficiency without the users having to create a ticket in the first place. But what does the escalation path actually look like? Well, as I mentioned, every ticket that comes in, whether it's a user, system alert, or an executive escalation, all come into an AV service desk who is checking for these tickets 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. What are they going to do? Well, based on the severity of the issue and what the actual problem that's happening, they will decide what type of technician is best suited for this issue. If it is a general issue that requires someone powering a device back on or doing some basic troubleshooting, it will go to our level 1 technicians. These are generalists who can go into a room, know their way around hardware, but may not have as much experience in audiovisual technologies. The level 2 technician is the most common tech that you will find in our larger offices. These are the ones who know AV, and they are the specialists. And most of the time, they are able to resolve the issues. But there comes a time when there are problems they cannot fix, or they may be software or hardware related, and they may require a little bit more expertise. That's when they go to our subject matter experts, or L3 technicians, the smallest group of technicians, but by far the ones with the most experience in the AV industry. These are folks who have been working in AV for a long time. They know what to look for, they know how to troubleshoot, they know how to look for variables in rooms, and they may not be able to actually resolve the issue. And if that does happen, then they create a bug, and that bug comes into our team. This slide is slightly out of date because we just became an official support team. But for years, for the last 5 or 6 years, we were known as an operations team, operationalized support. And my team consists of folks we call corporate operations engineers. A little bit of a mouthful, but what that means is that we work in an IT capacity to ensure that the rooms work. Now, there are situations where I and my fellow COEs cannot resolve an issue, and that's when we go to our engineering partners, who I'll talk about a little bit more. But I want to talk about how we actually troubleshoot and support these rooms, because that's what we're all here to talk about, right? This is known as Admin Console. If anyone here is a Google Workspace customer, this might look a little bit familiar to you. This is our single pane of glass. This is where we go if we want to see the health of a room. If we want to see a room has what we call a missing camera, the camera is disconnected, this will tell us this information. We can see a device history from this space. We can perform bulk actions like rebooting devices or moving them into additional organizational units that may be running on beta or stable if we want to test new software throughout our fleet. This is the place that we can go where we can look for trends, where we can look for health information, where we can see the composition of our fleet without having to run a SQL query, without having to ask someone in engineering, how many rooms have a Logitech PTZ Pro 2 camera? We can actually look up that information right in here. As you can imagine, I spend a significant amount of time in Admin Console looking out for our devices. We think of our team as stewards of the video conferencing fleet, but we don't do it alone. The boots on the ground, as I mentioned, are our AV maintenance technicians. They are the ones tirelessly from 5 in the morning through midnight are looking at these rooms in case there are any issues. They are the heart and soul of what we do. Let's not forget engineering, the most critical part of the process. Google Meet is what we use, as you might imagine, being the product that we create. Now, I'm agnostic. When it comes to any kind of video conferencing software or platform, I will talk to you about it, and I will sing its praises because I love the technology itself. I'm not here to sell you on anything. I'm here to talk about how we do what we do at Google. And that means that we do support interoperability. We do have that interoperability with WebEx as well as Zoom. I'm allowed to say those words because I love all kinds of video conferencing, and I've worked in video conferencing for longer than I care to admit. But Meet is something that we do, and Meet is an application, right? So it runs on the web or on mobile devices, and it's something that runs on these Chrome OS devices. So if you think about it, all of these devices are running Chrome OS as their operating system, but Meet is being run as an application on these devices with a browser. So we work both with the application team and most closely with the Meet devices team. These are software engineers who we go to when if there's a problem we can't fix, we go to them. We go to them with feature requests. You might be thinking, you are probably the biggest customer. Yes, we are. But we always look for ways that if there's a new feature we can put out, we can externalize it. So that if you're a Google Meet customer, you can take advantage of it. We're no different than any customer. We just give the Meet team a little bit more leeway in case something doesn't work or they're testing a new beta feature. So for us, this is super important that we have that key relationship as well. We also work with our AV product engineering team. These are the folks who design the standards for our meeting rooms. We are not designers on our team. We don't pretend to be designers. These are, in my opinion, the smartest AV engineers in the fleet. I don't mean to offend anyone here, but if you met them, you would understand and you would probably agree. We work with product engineering. They also put together our do-it-yourself spaces. One of our most famous ones is called Tech Talks. These are spaces where you can go in, plug in a laptop, join a Meet call. The earliest vintage of these use Crestron products like the DMPS as well as HD base T components. The newer generation uses NVX as well as a homegrown operating system that's been built that runs on a container. We also work very closely with the teleportation team. I've always wanted to say that. We were joking because folks were like, oh, you should wear a Star Trek uniform when you do this presentation. And I said, it wouldn't be the first time I've done that in Las Vegas. Project Starline, as I mentioned, is something that's really special to me because this engineering team has created a way that you can bridge the gap in time and space. And I recommend checking it out. It's going to be productized by HP in 2025. It is a unique product. Our AV maintenance technicians are limited in terms of what they can do just because of the complexity of the prototype that we see today. But they do come in and they do lend a hand to calibrate the system as well as do things like rebooting it. But being in that room is an experience. Of course, being at the Sphere last night was also an experience for those of you who were there. But Project Starline feels like we are living in the future. And when we think about the future, we also think about dogfooding new hardware. So for example, if we want to add something to our meeting rooms, maybe we want to refresh these spaces, or maybe there's some hardware that's not certified in India or China, we want to test that hardware before we install it at scale. We want something that's scalable and repeatable. What I do in my capacity for meeting rooms is I actually test hardware for supportability. Is this something that our AV maintenance technicians can actually support? Are there any blockers? Is there anything getting in the way of us being able to launch this new hardware internally? Is this something that we believe would be good for the fleet? So we work in many different capacities. We work in the reactive capacity when we get tickets. We try to be proactive by testing that hardware ahead of time in a limited number of rooms. But the most important thing that I want you to take away from this is the teamwork. The fact that we have many individuals working on this hardware and this software. Now, not every company can scale that way. We're Google, we have a lot of advantages in that world. But what can we use and what can we do to ensure that our devices are working? And the most important thing is having that telemetry and that reporting that's built into the product. Ways that we can see trends and understand what are the top issues that we're seeing. Are there hardware issues that are manufacturing related? Not as often. Are there software issues related to regressions? Can we work with the meat team? What tools do we need to build so we can do more remote support instead of sending a guy or a gal to a room anytime there's an issue? Are there ways that we can reboot a device, which might be a Band-Aid, but actually fix a problem and not just paper over it? All of the problems that we see at Google are things that you may see as well at your companies in any capacity. Everything that you work on is real to us as well. We're fortunate in the fact that we have many different groups that work in different functions. Notice that I mentioned that what our team focuses on, has a laser focus on, is support. That means that we have partners at other points of the product lifecycle. We have folks who work in procurement in the channel management side. We have folks who have a sparing strategy on the supply chain side to make sure that we have hardware when we need it. We have folks who work in asset management to make sure that when devices go into inventory, they're listed properly and gain network trust. We have an amazing deployments team. Imagine refreshing 10,000 rooms and what that would look like. Not an easy task. And we have a team that works on onboarding that new hardware and making sure that every team agrees. We have a phrase at Google called LGTM, looks good to me. You want to get an LGTM from every single one of the managers of the teams that I just mentioned. It is not an easy process. You can imagine a lot of us have opinions. We like to analyze things, and we all have something to say. So for me, I always like to come in on the supportability side and say, is this something that our AV maintenance technicians can support? And if that's true, I will approve a product. If not, I'll say, we need to give this more time, or we may need to get a fix in this, or I will give my conditional LGTM saying, this is okay to buy, but we can't actually deploy it until that issue is fixed. So problems are real. I don't want to sugarcoat anything and say, everything's perfect. When you have 36,000 endpoints, you think I ever have a dull day? I definitely don't, but I get to do little things too in Admin Console, which is pretty interesting. There's a home screen on all Google Meet devices, and we have a governance team that says this is the wallpaper that we want on video conferencing devices. Now, as AV people, you might be thinking, well, what about digital signage, right? Well, they've decided that our video conferencing devices can also be a form of digital signage to promote things like, we have something called Google Serve in the month of June, where every Googler, that's what they call us, is encouraged to participate in volunteer activities. And yes, you do get time off from work to participate in these. So we said, we're going to put wallpaper on all 36,000 devices. And I got an email from someone yesterday saying, you pushed the new wallpaper, where is it? And I said, oh, it might take time. We have 36,000 endpoints. So let's give it a few more hours. And then it was fine. But we get to do little things like that. We also get to test software in our fleet, which sounds a little risky, but we do have a startup mentality at Google, which is very interesting. So we do have a beta fleet of devices, a small percentage of our fleet running beta devices. Thankfully, we have patient users who are willing to overlook issues when things are in beta, but we do that so we can provide the best possible product out there for everyone who's interested. So with that in mind, I'd like to open up the floor to any questions. I believe we have a catch box that we're going to pass around, so we're going to get that ready. We want to hear from you. If I can answer the question, I will. If it's something under NDA, I might not be able to. If you are one of our partners who signed an NDA, come find me. And I'm going to give a short plug. If you stick around after this, at 10 o'clock, we have an enterprise IT meetup where I'm actually going to talk about how much of an introvert I am. You're thinking there's no way this dude is an introvert. He's been up here talking for 20 minutes nonstop. No way. But it's true. I can sit up here, I can talk to all of you nice people for an hour. I'm not going to. But when it comes to one-on-one conversations or group conversations, it's fight, flee, or freeze. I don't fight, but I don't engage necessarily, but I freeze. And you'll see that if you talk to me. I'm a totally different person when you hand me a microphone, whether here or at karaoke. With that in mind, let's go ahead and open up the floor to any questions you all have for me.
Come on, guys, put your hands up. Sure you got. There we go. Here we go. Right, brother, I'm going to throw this at you. All right, you're going to catch it, okay? Because that guy next to you looks really tough, and if it hits him, he's gonna get really angry. All right, you ready? Give him a round of applause.
Is this a microphone?
Nice catch.
Yes, it is.
Wow, cool.
The power of AV.
Hi. We have about 4,000 Google endpoints at Netflix, and we make heavy use of the admin console. One of the challenges is when a device goes down, you get an email alert saying it's down, and then you might get another alert 5 minutes later saying it's resolved itself. So there's a lot of nuisance emails. Do you have any tools for filtering those out by like a time threshold if it auto-resolves itself?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. It does create a lot of noise, right? And also sometimes a little bit of panic, especially if you get a large number of devices that are offline. So that's a good one. Let me talk to the Meet team about that because I like that idea. I know that there's been talk about could you change the threshold of that time? Some people think 30 minutes is too soon. And I'm actually glad you mentioned that because peripheral alerts, if there's a missing camera or microphone, those will actually trigger after 10 minutes. And I can imagine that could also create some noise. So I'm gonna make note of that. We love Netflix, by the way, not only as a customer, but also who doesn't love Netflix? You know what's awesome about Netflix? I'm gonna go on a tangent, is that Netflix started as the biggest movie company that didn't make any movies. Do you remember that? You remember when Netflix was just envelopes? I used to get 3 envelopes a day. I would watch Star Trek, and then I would mail the red envelope back. I love those. But I love your suggestion. Thank you. Keep the feedback coming. We want to make the products better. We don't want you to get that kind of noise. We don't want to get those emails. I don't want to tell you to create an email filter because then you'll miss an important one. So I think it's super critical that we take feedback like that from valued customers and prospective customers and really consider it because we get that too. And we've thought long and hard about that. So I have lots of friends on the Meet team, not just saying that to drop names, but yes, thank you, because I don't have an easy answer for that, but I think it's a great feature request. So thank you.
Also, what was your name?
Elliot,
Elliot, where are you from, Elliot?
Los Angeles.
Guys, let's make some noise for Elliot. He's the first question of the day.
Thank you. Yeah,
Appreciate it.
honestly, it takes a lot of confidence and courage to ask questions. I'll tell you, I sit in these sessions and I'm like, oh, I really want to ask that question. Am I going to sound dumb? You're not going to sound dumb because you're not dumb. No question is dumb. You know, your question is your opinion, and we want to hear what you have to say. Nothing is trivial. So ask away. I'm here.
Yeah, you want to have a go? Well done. Tell us your name and where you're from as well.
Hi everybody, my name is Steve, I'm from Boston. And I just was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about scenarios where if you have a live meeting in session, the quality goes poorly. How do you handle those scenarios, like the video quality or audio quality goes badly? What do you guys do at Google to resolve those, or what do you look at? Do you file reports that you bring to leadership afterwards? You know, if you could just talk about that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I love that question. Also a huge fan of Boston. I went to Brandeis outside of Boston, so used to live up there. So one of my favorite cities. Not going to talk about baseball, promise. But what do we do in those scenarios when things go wrong? Google Meet is great in terms of adapting, in terms of the video. So if you find that there is a network issue that's related to it, maybe a participant joining on Wi-Fi, or maybe just an actual problem that's happening, we do have reports that will come in. We do have things that will trigger if there are network incidents that we will look at. We also have some tools that we use on the back end that allow us to see what were the reasons why the call performed badly. Was it something that was network related, and can we trace it? Can we trace it all the way to the data center cell where the issue was happening, or was it something that was more on a border or a media router? You can see how deep you can actually get into the networking aspect of this. Was it an actual problem with the hardware, right? Was it something that was happening in the encoding? Was it the codec? And when I say the codec, I mean like VP9 or VP8, not the physical hardware box in the room, though that could also be something diagnostic. We try to get ahead of those issues. And what we do is we actually have something not in our Meet devices, but in our Meet for web and mobile tools that will actually say, we notice that your video performance is poor right now. Consider turning off your camera. Not that we want to pinpoint it on the user, but we may want to eliminate variables. But we do look for trends, and we look for ways that we can improve the performance of the product, because I don't want to pinpoint it to be on the network. In fact, something at Google that's really important to us culturally is the idea of things being blameless. For example, if an issue happens, we don't want to point the finger and say it's engineering's fault, or it's the network's fault, or it's the data center's fault. We actually want to get to the root of the problem and fix it. Imagine that. Imagine not blaming someone. That's hard for me. I grew up in New York. That's kind of what we do. You know, we look at the subway and we're like, oh, what's the reason why this train isn't running? Who should we blame? You know, oh, it's the MTA. Like, that's not their fault. You know, so I've learned that. And something I've learned also at Google is to have a lot of empathy on it, which again was very hard for me because I'm very quick to judgment and very quick. I have to control my emotions a lot more. That's another session for another topic. Your question wasn't about that. You just want to know, how do we fix problems when things are bad in meeting rooms? Sometimes it can be looking at a ticket that a user files. I mean, again, we don't want users to have to say, I had a poor experience. We want users to be able to give feedback, but we also want good feedback as well. But something that's really interesting is, how many times do you hear a user say, video conferencing worked really well for me today, versus how many times do you hear, I had a really bad meeting? It's sort of that polarizing Yelp review, 1 star versus 5 stars. How often do you write a 5-star review versus how often do you write a 1-star review? You don't have to answer that question, but I know where I stand on that. And as human beings, I think we tend to err more towards the negative, which is not necessarily a character flaw in any of us. It just means that when we look at something, we just want things to be better. And we expect a high standard. We expect a high standard in the year 2024, in a post-pandemic world, as we say, right? The new normal, all these wonderful phrases that I don't use, I say facetiously. But that's what we do, is we are constantly looking to improve our product. And I'm glad you asked that, Steve, because one thing that's important to the Meet Devices team is to be more proactive and get ahead of these issues. Rather than have a user report something and say, I did not have a good experience in the meeting, we would much rather poll our users after knowing what happened and say, we understand that this meeting that you were in did not go well. Here is what we are doing to make it right or make it better. But I think it's an iterative process, and I think it's something that we can keep getting better at, and I would like to see every platform continue to get better at. We are by no means perfect, but we're trying to get to a point where you have the best possible experience.